There it is. She even there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought she walked away for a second. Yeah, she's okay.
Okay, there you go.
All right, we are live on Facebook now.
No glasses.
Hello to everyone joining our virtual artist talk with our photographer Michelle Andonian this evening. I am Lauren Wolfer, Associate Curator of Special Collections and Archive at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, and the Curator of Hope Dies Last, the New Armenia. I'd like to show some appreciation to our sponsors and all involved with the making of this exhibit. Thank you to Tazian Enterprises for their generous donation in honor of Naomi Tazian. Thank you to our other sponsors, including Wayne and Linda Boyd, Sharon Eisbart Corporate Art, the James Foundation, Bob and Donna Jesse, Scott A. Miller, Jeanette D. Showeiler, John Snyder and Barbara Choka Snyder, Don and Kathy Steininger, Nancy and David Stewart, Chuck and Lisa Surak and Sweetwater Sound, and Melanie and Pete Wilson through their contributions to the 2019 FWMOA Annual Fund. The Fort Wayne Museum of Art is funded in part by Arts United, and this activity is made possible by the Indiana Arts Commission through the National Endowment of the Arts, a federal agency. A special thank you to Susie Hosepian from Beatrice and Raymond Paul Foundation for their donation, which allowed us to produce these catalogs, which are available to all guests in the gallery. And thank you to Caitlin Binkley for designing it. A huge thank you to Lucy Ardash and the Alex and Marie Manoogian Museum for being so generous and allowing us to extend the loans for the exhibit during these unprecedented times. While we could have extended the exhibit with just the photographs, it wouldn't have been the same. So if you're ever in Detroit, check out the Manoogian Museum. Their collection of Armenian art and history is really incredible. And finally, thank you to Michelle Andonian for being here tonight for our virtual artist discussion. She has jumped at every opportunity we have offered her, and we appreciate all that she has done. If you would like to find out more about her trip to Armenia, she wrote a blog post for us, which you can find at fwmoa.org, and the blog is listed under the Programs tab. In the next few weeks, we will release a professional video tour of this exhibit, made possible by all the donations we received on Giving Tuesday. Thank you to anyone and everyone who was able to donate to our cause. And if you hadn't had the chance to come into the museum to see the exhibit yet, or if you're still a little hesitant to leave the house, Lisa Dumeyer, our Director of Education, has been posting virtual tours of all the exhibits on the website. So thank you to her as well. You can find those in the details of the current exhibitions. Know that we have taken steps such as sanitizer stations and directing flow of traffic to keep our visitors safe. And we have plenty of gallery space for social distancing. So if you need to get out of the house, we are a good option. I would still encourage people to wear their masks. The museum has been working overtime to make available as much as we can, including these virtual tours and virtual talks. With the next one taking place on August 6th, there will be an in-person and a streamed version of the curator's tour of Salvador Dali's Stairway to Heaven. At any point during tonight, if you have questions, please post them in the comment section and my helper Caitlin will pass them along to me. Okay, I feel like a principal that got through all the talking points. So how have you been, Michelle? How's life up in Detroit?
Yeah, no, I'm doing just fine. I think we're all trying to find our way through these challenges. It's really been interesting to just adjust to being in one place and not moving around too much, but also just hanging in there and just trying to hope that everyone you care about and everyone basically just tries to stay healthy and so far so good. I'll knock on.
Has your dad stopped sneaking out for newspapers?
He did. I pick up the newspapers, but he has been known to show up at my family has a bar and a restaurant in the Irish Hills, and it's been hard to keep my dad away, so he masks up and he goes in for an hour every day and social distances and everything else. So yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging to have a business. It's challenging to have a museum. I don't know of anyone who is just like going, yeah, this is cool. I mean, this is once in 100 years. This is our pandemic. I mean, my
Right.
goodness, we really have got to figure out our ways to get through it. So yeah, I'm gardening a lot, pulling
Me
weeds.
too.
I'm pulling weeds. I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Is it just weeding, or are you planting anything in particular?
No, I've got some tomatoes and, I've got my little arugula in my pots and now the bugs are eating them. So now I'm trying to figure out what to do about that. I was braiding garlic the other day. So I grew my first garlic. So I'm a very, very much a novice here.
Nice.
But, gardening has been a real respite through all this. Whenever I just get frustrated, I just go outside and I'm grateful that I can do that.
Yeah. Well, based on what you do with Armenian culture and photography, do your siblings or anybody in your family get as into the Armenian culture as you have with your photography?
Well, I have to say I'm probably the biggest cheerleader, although my nephew does have an Armenian tattoo. So, oh, Andrew. I feel that my Armenian grandmother was a big influence on all of us. I mean, especially with myself and my siblings, because we grew up with her as our grandmother next door, but also as a survivor of the Armenian genocide. So I think that my generation, this generation that grew up with grandparents who were survivors, have a different experience moving forward. And I feel that our job is to pass that on to the next generation. So that really does inspire a lot of the work that I do.
Yeah. And so to give some background information onto how we became, to work with you on all these exhibits, there's a group of us that work on the National Photography exhibit. And so we were starting to meet and pile up and think of who we would want to invite to that exhibit. And you were brought up as a good example of documentary photography, and it became our best option. And we reached out to you and you accepted. And then it turned into, wow, that Armenian photography series she's worked on is so powerful. That would be such a great solo exhibit. And originally we planned to do that exhibit last year, but then we wanted you to go back to Armenia and refresh the series, and we sort of ran out of time to do that. So that's why the show got postponed for a year, and it resulted in you being able to go to Armenia, refresh the series, and that's now what we have on display, which is really great. And it's nice to see a contemporary version of Armenian photography and work. So that's how as the museum became familiar with your work. I think a lot of viewers will ask this if I don't. What kind of camera do you use to shoot these photos?
Well, I started going to Armenia over 30 years ago after the first Armenian earthquake. And, at that time, the world was really, the photography world was not digital. It was all film. And I've always worked in film. I shot black and white film. I worked with a Leica. I loved it. They're like my children. And I've never really let go of the film. Although I have literally expanded my view by using a panoramic camera. Years ago, I had studied with Sylvia Plahi at a workshop in California, and she really inspired me to the Widelux camera, which I dug out of the things. And, it's funny because people say to me, oh, is that an old camera? And I'm like, no. But then I realized, oh, I'm getting older. It is an older camera. But what it does is it pans, right? I don't know.
Oh, that's cool.
The lens actually moves. So it's really a lovely experience. People, by the time you're done taking a picture, they don't even know it's a camera, I mean, it's like, so I've been working with the wide lux for years. So I work with that camera, and then the idea of the panorama is something that I really love to, I love the expanse. I love that bringing that longness to it. So I started working with the Hasselblad X-Pan, which is a little more traditional looking. It's just a fixed lens. And so the photographs in the exhibition are taken with the wide lux. They're taken with the X-Pan. They're both with film. So I would shoot the film, and I never really knew what I had until I got back. But, then I did the color work. I ended up doing that with my iPhone, which was just because it's so amazing now that the technology has allowed us to use the phone and come up with really great quality photographs that you can hang in a museum, right?
Yeah. And also, so people know, the small color photos that are in the exhibit are also available in the shop. You can buy a small one for an easily $35 if you want to, start your art collection now. Are the black and white ones an addition that are available for sale too?
Yeah, the black and white, your Abby at the museum shop has a price list. That's more, those prices are more on par with, what the work usually sells for. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about before with the exhibit that it's so, it's so exciting to be able to start collecting art. I mean, how important it is to be surrounded by imagery and paintings and sculpture and things like that take you back to places that you went to. So I wanted to really make something that was affordable and, easily accessible for people. So when I looked at all the work on the, on the little prints that I was taking on my phone, they ended up being this nice little color narrative, like and also my journal, my visual journal as I was traveling. I know one of the things that you had asked me to do, while I was traveling was to write about, what was happening and to kind of journal about the trip, because the trip was commissioned by the museum. I mean, I that allowed me to be able to go back and revisit places that I had been to already in Armenia, and then also go to some new places and discover some new things. But what was interesting was, as I was trying to write, in a car over bumpy roads, I mean, it was just ridiculous. So I just gave up on the writing aspect of it and just started taking photographs. And these photographs on my phone have turned into, I mean, they're pictures in the exhibition. They're notes that I go back to. I'm trying to scroll back to this time now because I was in Armenia, last year at this time. But, I mean, it was just so cool to be able to just go back to that day. Here's where I was. This is what I did on this day. This is what I was traveling. And, some of them aren't even pictures as much as they are visual notes, like, oh, I'm going to take a photograph of that, and it will remind me later to write about that. So, yeah, so I think that it's been a real bridge of technology, right? There's film, the traditional. I'd never give that up, no matter what happens. I love it. I love the mystery of it. I love the unknowing. I love the hunting aspect of picking up a camera and with digital cameras now, so many times you take a picture and you look at the camera, and you take a picture, you look at the camera. And it takes you out of the moment. It takes you out of what's happening in front of you. And you want to be able to be present for that, right? You want to be able to keep moving with it. It's like a dance that you do. So film allows me, it removes the temptation to look at it and say, do I have this? Oh, I've got this. I think this is pretty good. I can move on to this now. No, I don't know. All I know.
How scary is that, not knowing if you got the shot or not?
Well, I grew up with it, so I kind of know it, and I mean, I'm used to that, and I think that that's part of the beauty of shooting with film, is that, or the stress and anxiety, the holding of the film, it's like you shoot digitally, you back it up, you can load it up to a cloud, you can, it's in 3 or 4 different places. With film, you've got the roll of film, right? And you've got to make sure that it's not going to go through the wrong X-ray, or it's not going to get too hot. And then when you process it, how it's going to get to the lab and when it's going to go back. And then when the lab out, I end up sending my film out to a lab now. And, when they finally post all the digital scans of everything, it's a huge relief, at the same time. You see what you saw, you learn what you got, you watched, you revisit it in a way that's different, because it's almost like I'm seeing it for the first time. I'm photographing, and the camera, the shutter closes. I'm not seeing exactly what I have unless I'm shooting with a Leica, which, does allow you to see that moment. And the wide Lux does for a certain, there's nothing that cuts off that image when the shutter opens and closes. But there's something about revisiting and seeing it really for the first time as a photograph, right? The color is removed because I'm working in black and white. I'm thinking about all these things when I'm taking a picture, but I'm also trying to think about, what is in what's place and what's filling up certain spaces, and then maybe waiting for that person to come, and then they don't come.
Yeah, we have that one photo with like the people on the field, and you said that you were just like watching it play out, and then you knew as soon as you took the picture that was the one.
Yeah, I remember when you first came to Detroit, when we were reviewing all the stuff from the shoot, I said, okay, Lauren, I said, here's the photograph where I feel like if I don't shoot anything else on this trip,
right,
I took this picture. Where is it? No, those are the kids.
Here it is.
Yeah, it's got it. Yeah, it was at Marmoshen, was the monastery that it was at. This photograph here, which is printed huge in the exhibition. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like I want people to be able to see it and feel like they can kind of come. Yeah, that's it right there. But it's I saw these women and their children, and it was so hot that day. I mean, it was so hot. So they've got an umbrella to keep them from the shade. And just like watching these people come together, and here I was right on the river, which is also a border, between Armenia and Turkey. So there's that kind of connection of being so close to the Turkish border, and knowing that this monastery, this church, Marmoshen, was designed by the same architects that did Ani, which is was known as the land of 10,000 churches. It's an amazing place, which is now literally a stone's throw away from Armenia, but is part of Turkey now. So it was a place I wanted to try to go to on this trip. I wanted to try to go back to Ani because I've been there before, and I don't feel like I could ever spend enough time there. But it just wasn't going to work out. And so we ended up in Marmoshen, and I knew, at that moment when I saw all this happening, I knew that's right where I was supposed to be. So, yeah.
Bear with me. I'm trying to I haven't been a host before.
Yeah, it's up on the screen now, but it's like, if you looked at the building of that photograph, I watched these people for a while, and then, it's like looking at the picture and deciding, okay, I love that kid up on the hill, this lady's moving this way, this one's moving that way, oh, this one's, it's like you wait for, there's probably 7 or 8 photographs of that scene, right? but it's also watching and waiting, and for all the planets to align and the people to be in the right space, and that you don't know until you're far, far away, and on the other side of the world. There's no repeating it. A lot of people looked at it and said, "Did you set that up?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't."
Ask people to sit for a minute.
That picture was a gift for sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when did you first realize that you wanted to be a photographer or an artist?
Oh, well, I'd always loved taking photographs. I think I took my first photograph when I was about 14 years old. It's a picture of my parents getting ready to go out on New Year's Eve that I took with like a Brownie Hawkeye camera. That was my dad's. My dad was somebody who was always taking the pictures in our family. But when I was in high school, we had a photography class. It really kind of saved my life. Pete Manshot was my photography teacher. And, it was the class that you finally felt like, wow, this is so much fun. I love this. I love going into the darkroom. We had a darkroom there. And, for those of you that are digital, a darkroom is a place where you would take a blank piece of paper and put it into chemicals, and this image would come up, and it was like magic, So when I graduated from high school, I was not what you would call a stellar student. I was good in my art classes and in my photography classes. And I remember when, at graduation, our class song was "Do You Know Where You're Going To" by, it was the theme for Mahogany by Diana Ross. And I had no idea where I was going to go. I just knew that I didn't want to hate what I did. I didn't want to, and what I loved was photography. So I made a beeline for it, and I've never looked back from that moment.
Yeah. Do you have any crazy photo assignments? Because you worked at a newspaper, didn't you?
I did. I worked, when I got out of school, I worked as an assistant for a commercial photographer. And then I started working, I got a job as an intern at the Detroit News. And this was a time when there weren't that many women photographers on staff. And Barb McClellan was the photo editor. And I had photographed the last day that Hudson's was open, which was our department store. It was like our Macy's in Detroit. Right. No one knew it was the last day. And I just had a feeling that morning when I got up that I had to go there and take pictures. I grew up at Hudson's, got your first haircut, saw Santa Claus, all that good stuff. And it turned out when I got home that night that was the last day the store was opened.
Wow.
So I realized that, oh my gosh, I've documented something that's historic. And it just felt so complete to have been able to do that. So I called up the newspaper. I'm like, "Hi, I photographed Hudson's, and ironically enough, Barb was like, "Okay, come in and show me your work." And that's how I got my job at the newspaper as an intern, with that series of photographs, because, she said, we sent 3 photographers to Hudson's, and these photographs are different. And I think they were different because they were me revisiting who I was, right? As a kid, going and exploring a space. I feel that way about a lot of my work in Detroit, but it's also connected to my work in Armenia. I mean, I photograph what I know, and what I feel compelled to preserve for the next generation. I mean, this is my time here on this earth, and it's a record of so it really is, the newspaper was an amazing experience for me. I mean, I was literally a kid out of school, all of a sudden in the middle of the biggest candy store you could possibly imagine. I mean, I was a photographer at a newspaper. You went everywhere, and talk about not knowing. I mean, you had to produce and you had to come back, and it wasn't like I was a trained journalist. I mean, I think through it all, I've always learned under fire. So.
When wasn't it an assignment that you did for the newspaper that got you into your Armenian heritage and like working with taking photos?
The first Armenian piece that I did was a story for the Detroit News Sunday magazine back when they had one, right? I mean, newspapers have changed a lot. On the commemoration of the Armenian genocide. And there is a family friend, Florence Mazian, who's a scholar who's spent a lot of time working on the genocide and doing oral histories of people who survived in the Detroit area. And she had said to me, you know, sit down with your grandmother now and get her story. Which I had done prior to doing this newspaper thing. But when I pitched, right, the newspaper, the Armenian story, Florence was the writer on that piece. And she, you know, I mean, it was her interviews with these survivors. So yeah, that was the first piece that I did. That was, you know, that was back in the 80s. That was, you know, in the late 80s when we published that. And it really, I think that it's always something I've held on to throughout my career. It's a way of holding on to what I've lost, you know, by losing my grandmother. It's a way of holding on to what I want to hold on to and pass on to the next generation, which is our culture, our art, our food. You know, it's like, it's a big part of it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then between your first visit and your most recent one, can you tell a difference in the landscape or the people? Has there been any sort of change that you've noticed?
Well, Armenia has changed a lot. I mean, when I first went after the earthquake, it was still under Russia, right? I mean, Armenia was part of that collection of countries that Russia had. And it was very much a Soviet state at that point. You know, I mean, it was after the earthquake. They were poor anyway, but after the earthquake, it was even worse. It was a desolate, dusty country with a lot of poverty. It still is a very poor country. But the thing that has never been poor in Armenia, even from then up until now, is the people spirit, right? The spirit of the Armenian people has, you know, even in its bleakest times, is so inspiring to see how they survive and how they come together and you know, the families in the villages, because this is where I would spend a lot of time early on. I would go into the villages and spend time with families and you know, places that were completely devastated. So yeah, Armenia's changed a lot. You know,
that sort of inspired the title for the exhibit too. Can you tell us the story behind what inspired Hope Dies Last?
Well, Hope Dies Last is something that Archbishop Parin, he's an archbishop now. At that time, he was a priest at St. John's. And he was, you know, my first trips to Armenia were through the AGBU, and I had gone there. So I was very involved in various relief efforts happening in Michigan going back to Armenia. And Sirbazan Parin, you know, had said he was telling me the story about an Armenian man that he had met, because this was after the earthquake. This was years after the earthquake, when he had moved to Gyumri, which is one of the towns that was devastated by the earthquake, about a man who had come to the church who had lost his arms and lost his legs and his entire family. And it was just too much to even wrap your head around. And even for you know, a man of the cloth, right? You know, I mean, it was just like, you know, he said, how do you go on from this? And the man said to him, because hope dies last. So when Sirbazan told me that story, Hope Dies Last stayed in my mind. I know that, you know, people have, you know, said to me, well, you know, that's a popular saying, but that was the first time that I heard it. And I had written it down on a piece of paper, and it just stayed up on my bulletin board for for probably 20 years, right? It was something that I never wanted to forget. So when the 100th commemoration of the genocide happened in 2015, I remembered that, and that became the name of a musical composition and a collaboration that I was working on with Detroit Chamberwinds, and a project that I had gotten a grant through the Knight Foundation, the John L. Knight Foundation, to be able to work on this Armenian project for the commemoration of the genocide in the book and the musical thing, and there was an exhibition at the College for Creative Studies. But Hope Dies Last was never a title for an exhibition of photographs. It was never the title of the book. So when you asked me, when we were, starting to put all these things together, what should we call this show? When I explained to you, what about Hope Dies Last? I mean, we're really at a time where we need to hold on to that now too, right? So that's how it got named. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as
The
I remember, as soon as
curatorial
you told me,
approved
it was
name.
like, this is it. It's
Yeah.
too good. I think what I appreciate about your photography is that even though these people have been through so much, your photography has a very positive and strong outlook on the country and the people. And it's very much reminiscent of the photographs taken during the Great Depression almost, that like showed people this is the situation, and hopefully inspires people to find out more and research more. It certainly has inspired me to look up more, and I barely know. I mean, I was at zero when we started talking about Armenia, and I probably still know just a little notch above zero, but I think learning anything you can is always important, and education as always,
Yeah, well, it's a real honor to be able to bring the Armenian culture and the Armenian people to people who aren't familiar with it. I mean, you kind of, the Armenians, they kind of all, grow up in a vacuum. It, you take it for granted. But I mean, this exhibition is a result of people that aren't Armenian curious about Armenian culture, which is the biggest honor. I mean, I can't even express to you how much it means to me that you've engaged in wanting to learn more, and that it's teaching other people about it. There are so many things that happen to us, our humanity, right? No matter what our culture is, that can give us lessons and hope to kind of move forward to. We can see what our ancestors went through and say, all right, listen, I've got to stay inside and watch Netflix for 6 months. I think I can do this, It's amazing to me, looking back on history, the history of our cultures, the history of pandemics. I mean, this is a once in 100-year experience we're going through right now.
Yeah.
So.
I want to remind people that if they have questions, to leave them in the comments section. I mentioned it earlier, but if you weren't tuned in yet, leave us some comments. Do we have any at this moment?
Yeah, if you have any, is anyone out there? Hi.
Mike Werrell says hi. Ward? Okay.
Mike Ward. Yeah.
Ward.
Yeah, Mike.
That's the comment. Okay. We've talked about some of the symbolism that is in your photographs. Can you mention any to the public that might be coming in and seeing the photographs? What certain things that they might see in the photographs stand for something else?
Well, I think that, in the Armenian, when I think about the photographs in the exhibition, I mean, a lot of them are churches, right, and monasteries. It's something that I think that my travels in Turkey and seeing how many of them were lost, and the importance of being able to document them and have these images moving forward. In Armenia, they're not under that risk of being, turned into a mosque or destroyed, but they are very old. I mean, they date back to, 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century. the symbolism of how they were monasteries. There were monks there. They worked on illuminated manuscripts. There was a very much an artistic tradition involved in whether they were making, writing things down or doing prayer scrolls, which is one of the things that the Manugia Museum loaned us for the show, and that inspired me to kind of do something that had that same idea. The Hachkar, which is the cross, which you've got your prop.
I have all the props with me.
So the Hachkar is a very important Armenian symbol, and if you move it up a little bit, I think that there's like the circle. It just represents, the permanence of life, right? I mean, it's like if I've got, we're dueling Hachkar. So, this is like the circle of life on this one, but it's an interesting thing. When I was doing my research on, Armenianness and things like that, the thing I learned about the Hachkar, which I hadn't known, was, Armenia was, the first state to recognize Christianity in the 3rd century. And they had to, educate a country basically of people who you were for the most part pagans. At that time you worship the sun, you worship the moon, you worship the earth. The idea of Christianity was not anything that had taken hold. And, the Crusades had gone through this area. Rome was, present and prevalent. But St. Gregory, the Illuminator, who's the person who brought the saint who brought Christianity to Armenia, the thing I learned about the Hachkars was like, they were like these storybooks, right? They were these like billboards, to explain it better, that were out to show people that this is what Christianity is, so, are you interested in learning about it? And they didn't go with the Catholic version, the Roman version of Christ on the cross. You will very rarely see Christ on a Hachkar. They took the version of, pomegranates and grapes and the carvings of life. I mean, it's all about life and reinventing life and the permanence of life. So I always thought that, I'm always learning something new, maybe some scholars can correct me on this, but when I found this out, I was just like, wow, that's amazing, right? That back in the 3rd century, they were like, okay, how are we going to present Christianity, teach Christianity to people who can't read, right? Who, for the most part, Armenia later, at a later time came, they have their own alphabet, all the churches, the monasteries. I mean, it's grown and grown and grown, but to me, it's just amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism in those things, and the shape. The shape of the top of the churches is very distinctive to Armenia. That kind of almost like a crown, that goes on top. That's also very distinctive Armenian church. Yeah.
Okay, we did get a question. What kind of film do you use? And are there any processing techniques that you use?
Well, my processing technique right now is a lab in New York that I send my film to. I shoot with Tri-X, Kodak Tri-X 400. Because with the wide lux, I only have 3 choices of exposure. It's either a 15th of a second, 125 or 250. And then your aperture, which is how wide your lens opens. There's only about 4 or 5 stops that I have there. So the Tri-X gives me a broader range, and I just, push it a little bit and pray. So does that answer the question, I hope?
People are asking to see more photos, so I'm going to try to figure this out.
Yeah, for sure.
If you would like to talk about the importance of having your artwork in the collection and collected by a museum specifically, while I try to figure this out.
Okay. Yeah, and meanwhile, I'll show some of the little color ones that are available. So, you know, you can look at it instead of me, right? So, although I don't know, does that even read Mount Ararat? Probably better for you to kind of get them loaded up. But the images to be in the collection of the museum it's such an honor because it'll outlive me. I mean, anytime work goes into a permanent collection of a museum, there's a reason for that word permanent, right? I mean, it's there. And so I feel that that's a huge honor. I mean, I spend a lot of time in museums looking at photographs and the thought that, you know, that my work is in museum collections it's very humbling. It really is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just double checking. This is my first time being a host, so I'm slowly.
Yeah, you're doing great. I'm just like blah, blah, blah.
Somebody was hoping you could tell more about your grandmother and her story through the genocide.
Well, my grandmother was from a small village called Ishkan, which means little prince. And she was a happy young girl living in an Armenian village in Sivas. And she had a brother and her mother, her father, her father was a shepherd. My great grandfather was a shepherd. They had a lot of land. So they were, if you had land, you had everything you needed. You know, if you had land and sheep, then you really had it going on, right? But in 1915, it was a massive movement that happened all over Turkey, where the men from the families were taken away, and my grandfather it would have been my great grandfather, was taken away, and there was a desperate plea to come up with enough money to free him, which they came up with a little bit, and that brought him home for a couple of weeks, but then he was gone again, and then ultimately he was killed. And my grandmother and her mother and her brother were on the then everybody had to leave their villages. So there were massive marches through the desert, it's like 1.5 million Armenians were killed. My grandmother had told me the story about how she the only thing she remembered was the smell. So you just can't even, the smell of the bodies that she had to walk over as a 6 or 7 year old child. It's hard to, wrap your head around that, growing up in the United States, the way that we've been able to do that. And then at the same time, to look at what's happening, with the refugee situation in Syria, you can understand, to a certain extent what these people went through. So, so you're cutting to the wedding necklace, which is a big mystery that we have in our family. This was just always known as the wedding necklace. And, the big question is, how did it get through the genocide? I mean, did Auntie, who was my grandmother's aunt, who basically rescued her from, took her from her mother during the genocide, during the marches, once they got to Syria, and then, she worked as a house cleaner and all these other things, and arranged a marriage for her in the United States, which ultimately she came here. So we always had this necklace in our family, and it was just always known as the wedding necklace. Now, whether this was Auntie's wedding necklace, I don't think it was my grandmother's, because she's not wearing it in any of the photos, but ultimately we do have it. And it is, it is from the late 1800s, early 1900s. So it's a real treasure. It's when there was a proposal, that the groom would then give the bride, a gift of jewelry. The family would give the bride, the husband's family would give the bride a gift of jewelry. And so this is what that was. So that's also in the exhibition. That was something that you know, my cousins and I pass back and forth when someone's getting married, and it's just kind of you know, kept as a family heirloom, and it belongs to all of us. It belongs to, you know, not one person. So
I think what I like about that photo of the grandmother in the church lighting the candles with the kids that I had on previously is it's sort of a visual representation of what your, you know, grandmother passed on to you. It's sort of, here's this woman passing on the traditions to the kids within the church too. So I thought that was.
yeah, no, it's true, Lauren, and you're really perceptive on picking up on that whole experience, because, you know, my grandmother always used to say that your home is your church, right? And she always used to have a candle lit on the stove constantly. I mean, yeah, but you know, at that time, you didn't really understand where that came from. So it is true. It's what I look for, right? When I go, I mean, I'm looking at the older women and seeing my grandmother. I'm looking at the children and I'm seeing myself, or I'm seeing the next generation. I'm seeing, yeah, it's a way of holding on to it. But the candle lighting is a very, very Armenian tradition in the churches, and there are no electric candles in the Armenian churches. I mean, it's wax that they recycle by somebody picking up the wax of the candles that have been burned and making new candles. So that whole act of prayer and hope is repeated again and again and again and again with the same material. I mean, to me, that is just amazing, right?
Well, in your previous series, you also used the candle wax to make encaustics too. So you're physically bringing those candles back to America and creating pieces, right?
Yeah, and I have, you know, I mean, I still have. I was gonna work on some, but then for this show, but then I ended up getting obsessed with a prayer scroll. So the encaustics kind of, you know, I mean, I still have. I love doing that. I loved making almost like modern day icons, and I think that that's kind of what the work is translating to now, outside of just taking the photographs and documenting the people and the landscape and the churches and things like that, but to actually come home and get my hands on something that has that energy from that place and make something new is a real challenge for me at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, the candles are, I mean, it's an amazing experience to go into these churches and light these candles and in this space, and the years of candles being burned, you know, the blackness and the darkness and the stone. It's just incredible. Yeah. My kids.
Okay, we did have another question that came through. What was the initial inspiration to do photo essays?
Oh, to do photo essays?
Yeah, that's the question.
To tell a story. I mean, I love being able to collectively gather photographs and tell a story. I mean, I think that's why I loved working in a newspaper so much. You know, I mean, back in the day, there was Life magazine and the photo essay, right? The photo story. To be able to have a beginning and a middle and you know, an end or a transition or something, to be able to see something through images. I feel it's my best language, you know, I mean, to be able to do that. I love being able to tell a story through photographs, because I love to be able to, I want people to be able to go there too, right? And a photograph can do that. It can take you to a place. Yeah. So
well, we talked to, you mentioned that in your blog about how art has that power to be able to transport you to I guess a different psyche, because you can't physically, you know, go anywhere. And so that being like art being a great way to sort of travel through the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, and to now, you know, to even travel back, but you know, this is I can't go to where nobody can leave the United States right now.
Right.
That's crazy. I mean, really wrap your head around that. That's unbelievable. But the experiences you have when you travel are so rich, and they change your life. So now it is art, it is music, it is painting, and the best place to experience these things and to find something that speaks to you now is the museum. So we're lucky that it's a space that can be opened, that can be opened safely. I've been to the museum since you guys have kind of got it all figured out now, and you feel really safe, and the distancing and everything like that. So it's our travel right now, to be able to go through that. And a photograph always, in my mind, it's always been able to take me back to the moment that I took it. But it's also interesting to see how it talks to other people. That's why I don't say too much about my work specifically. I want you to have your own experience with it.
Mm-hmm. So we're in the last 10 minutes of this. Do you want to tell us about what projects you're working on now, or anything upcoming?
Well, I have, thank God for the Knight Foundation is all I can tell you right now. I mean, the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, helped me realize this amazing experience of being able to go back to Armenia and having, a museum exhibition, which is huge. But I've also, been fortunate enough to have most of the bodies of, the beginning, the initial seeds of the Armenian project as it came to realize in 2015 was through a grant from the Knight Foundation. And just before I had to move out of my studio in Eastern Market because the building was sold, I was awarded another grant through the Knight Foundation through their Knight's Arts Challenge that is a project that I'm working on called Core 375, which has to do with digging into the history of Detroit from the view that I actually once had from my studio, which looked out on the freeway. But they're going to close the freeway. Now it's scheduled for 2022. So I'm doing like a visual core sample, like digging back to millions of years to the historic times and going through the different layers of history, whether it's the Native Americans, it's the French and the discovery and the ribbon farms and the settling of Detroit and Black Bottom and the huge African-American community that was all in that area, bringing it all up to the present. So I'm going way back now, it's like 3rd century wasn't enough for me with Armenia. Now it's a good time for me to go back even further. So that'll all come to fruition in God willing, 2022. We'll see what happens with the pandemic and everything else that's going on. It's the best plan now is no plan, right?
Right, exactly. So do you want to tell us about the Armenian proverb that you would like to finish with?
Well, I was, we were talking earlier and I said that, you'd asked about my website and I said, well, I'm still kind of working on that. I mean, I've been working on that for years since, whatever. Anyway, but what Michael Walsh, who's working on it with me, who's a great designer, had said, why don't we use Armenian proverbs as like, kind of cue points for imagery. So the proverb that really stands out to me is a tree stands taller when it knows its roots. And that really does sum up my work. It sums up what I hope other people can get out of the work. That it can inspire them to dig deeper into their own story, into their own history. We're at a time now where it's a good time to reach out to your grandparents or your family and to look through these photographs and to find out what is your story and have that record. because it's really important. I mean, I got my grandmother's story when I was 18 years old. You know, I grew up with these old ladies who, you know, wore babushkas and you know, picked grape leaves off the side of the road. I mean, it was like embarrassing, right? You know, like, who are these people? You know, you're a young American girl, and now I'm eyeing the grape leaves on the side of the road. You know, I'm like going, wow, maybe now is the time to pick these things. You know, so if there's anything to go back to, it's I hope that people are inspired by seeing the exhibition, of course, to learn more about the Armenians and the Armenian history, because, you know, I mean, I'm a little partial to that, but to go into your own story, because it's your story, it's your family, and it's unlike anyone else's, yet it's very similar. So, yeah.
Well, that seems like the perfect note to end on. Thank you, Michelle, for being here and available to do this virtual tour.
Oh my God, Lauren, thank you for everything that you've done. You have been, you are so, like, she's so good to work with, like just writing the blog, you know, or asking me about something, you know. I have a tendency to procrastinate. So she just knew how to handle me, which is really great. Thank you.
I always tell her a deadline and expect it to be at least a week later.
But, you know, when it was a hard deadline, I always showed up, right?
Yes, you always showed up. So, anyway,
We got it up on the walls.
And thank you for to everyone for joining us this evening. I hope
thanks everybody for tuning in.
A whole lot.
Yeah, take care.
And look forward to seeing you the next time. Bye, Michelle.
Yeah, come see the show. Okay, take care. Bye.